各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎来到周一详谈，我是 Katrina Chen 陈伟珍。大家可能觉得我看起来有点眼熟，因为我在加拿大卑诗省有10多年的从政经验，曾经担任学务委员、省议员到卑诗省的省务厅长。在我今年决定不再参选之后，很高兴能够受到龙翔的邀请，参加周一详谈的节目，希望未来给各位观众带来更多精彩的节目内容。那我目前也是安信信用合作社的总裁，也做许多本地的社区公益活动。今天很高兴，我第一个节目就请来我非常好的一位朋友，在从政多年之中给了我非常多的鼓励。他就是我们北 Delta 的省议员，目前也担任2个非常重要的厅长职位，不只是1个哦，是2个。他就是我们的城镇事务跟住房问题的厅长 Ravi Kahlon。Welcome to our show, Ravi.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to chatting today.
Yes, I have a lot of questions for you,
Okay.
and we've worked together for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I just remember that when we first got elected in 2017, we actually shared a small office together in the legislature.
I do remember. Yeah, those were the early days when we were new and excited MLAs, and we had a lot to learn. And now we've learned a lot. So now we can go on with life with all those lessons.
Totally.
Yeah.
And looking back, you were also the first person who encouraged me to run provincially in 2017. And that really gave me a lot of encouragement when you asked me to do it. I was in my early 30s, fairly new to politics in some ways. And your trust really meant so much to me. And I know you've done that for many other women of color and people of color as well. Can you share a little bit why having diverse experiences in government is really important?
Well, first I would say that often people who are in the South Asian community, Chinese community, you name it, any racialized community, they come in and they think, oh, I don't know if I can do this.
Right.
Or maybe they have more information than me, or they have more knowledge than me. And when you get in the room, like we have, you realize they don't. We have experiences, we have knowledge, we have things to contribute. And I think that's what I saw when I saw you. I saw knowledge, I saw experience, and so that's why you did so well, in my opinion, because you fit that mold. But the reason why we need people at the table is because when decisions are made, if our experiences are not part of the decision making, then what happens is the policies never work for community. Like, for example, childcare. When childcare policies came forward, the reason why you were good at the file was because you understand that childcare is important, but also so is family reunification. So is having grandparents being able to come and be close to their kids. Because in our communities, it's lovely to have a grandparent, how important it is for the child, for the family. And so understanding that both are very good and important helps the policies be more reflective of where the population is. So I'm always encouraging people. I hope we can find more talent like you that will come forward and run. And luckily, we've seen some good people come forward as well.
That's right. Well, this legislature, we've elected way more women than ever before, which is a great news for the province and for the diversity of our legislature. After I left politics, many people tend to ask me, how was it like in the legislature? Is it really hard? Do you fight a lot? And personally, I did face some challenges, especially as a woman of color and younger among our colleagues, even though I'm not that young anymore. But how would you say, what can we do to make the legislature more welcoming, to welcome not just diverse voices to come in, but to retain them, to make sure that the space is a safe space for everybody to be?
Well, when I think you got elected, there were many young people in the legislature. And now we've got a lot more people. And I think part of the change is having people elected. When you have people elected, they look around the room and say, this is not how it should be, right? When you have people, and no offense to people who are older, but when you have people that are older, they're retired, they've already, they got financial wealth, they've got a home, they think a certain way. When you're young or a person who's just arrived to Canada and you're struggling to do basics, find a place to rent, dreaming of a home, wanting to raise a child, but knowing childcare costs are high, you bring an experience to the building that changes the building. It changes the culture of the space. And so that's what we're seeing now. Is we're seeing a lot of new MLAs who are saying the culture needs to change. We can't be this way. We have to make it more safe for people. It's not there yet, but we have a lot more work to do, but it's moving, and I feel that it's moving in the right direction.
Well, you've been a force of change yourself. I've witnessed that firsthand from the beginning. If you have an advice to yourself from 2000, to your old self in 2017, when we were just sharing that small office back to back, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself, keep asking questions. Sometimes when you go into a new job or into a room where there's older people, you're always afraid. If I ask a question, what if it's not a good question? Will I be embarrassed? And so the advice I would give my young self is ask all the questions, learn from everybody. When I came in, there was a lot of people I looked up to, and sometimes I was afraid to ask them questions because I was like, I don't want to say something say something maybe dumb or say something that doesn't make sense. And so to my younger self, I would say, ask questions, be brave, stand up, speak, share whatever I believe in a more forceful way.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of people we look up to, I thought of our former Premier, John Horgan, who just passed away recently, and it's quite a loss for our province. And you worked for him as a staff member, getting elected, and worked with him as a colleague, and now with our new Premier, David Eby. What do you think has changed among different leadership and also government priorities?
Well, I would say that every leader has different qualities. The strength that John Horgan had was he loved people. He loved talking to people. Everybody has a story with John. And now when people come to my office and they come to send a message to his family, they always say, well, I met him here. I met him on a bus, and this is what happened. He told a funny story. So I think he's left a personal connection on the province, and he did a lot of big things. We brought in childcare, we brought in UNDRIP. It was a really powerful time. And now we've got David Eby, who is a great listener. He likes to listen to people, and he is not afraid to do big things. I think that's the one thing about him. When he sees something, he just goes 100% to fix it. With ICBC, we saw like it was a dumpster fire. He came in and transformed it. Money laundering in casinos, same issue. He came in and said, let's clean house. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to work with him and to see what legacy he leaves the province in the coming years.
Of course. So what are some of the government's current priorities, especially with the new cabinet?
Well, I would say that healthcare is going to be one of the biggest ones. We know right now that people want access to good quality healthcare, and they don't want to have to wait. They don't want to be sitting in long lines. And we have seen a big population increase. And because of that, we've seen real pressures on our healthcare system. So I think healthcare will be the biggest one. The second one, of course, is housing. It used to be that it was young people who were worried about housing. How do I find a place to buy? Now people are worried about rent because they can't even afford rent. On top of that, you've got seniors who are like, I'm worried about my kids. I want my grandkids to be close to me. So housing right now is a major issue. We're going to continue to move forward on making sure people have access to affordable housing. And public safety would be the third. It's critically important that people feel safe in their communities. And whenever an incident happens, it's horrifying. And so it's our job to work with communities to make sure that people are supported. Those that have mental health issues have the supports they need. Because in the end of the day, when we see somebody with mental health, it's easy to see them and say, oh, well, look, they should do something about it. But it's harder to look at them and say, that's somebody's child. That's somebody's cousin or nephew, and that could happen to any of us. Any one of us could have a family member that has a mental health issue. And so we have to treat everybody that way. So I think those will be some of the big issues that we're taking on as a government.
Okay, actually I kind of want to expand on that a little bit, because when you talk about mental health, how that's connected to our healthcare system, how's the well-being of our community, and really to housing. And that's connected to our economy, right? When people have a safe home and roof over their head, they will be able to work and contribute to our society. Can you elaborate on that a little bit about government's action in those areas, and what are some of the key actions you think your government would take in the coming year?
Yeah, well, when it comes to housing, we've taken some big action. I think the Globe and Mail newspaper just said we were the leaders in North America. And the reason why is that we understand that we need the private industry to be able to build housing. So we've changed a lot of rules so that the decisions are made faster. We cut a lot of red tape. You know, a lot of people see the policies we brought in and they say, oh, that doesn't seem like NDP policies, right? But what we're saying is when it comes to housing, when it comes to any issue, we want the best ideas. We want the best solutions. So on one side, we have to cut some tape, red tape, allow for housing to be built faster. But we also, as a government, have to invest in affordable housing. Because those that are developers, if they wanted to build housing for people who are low income, they couldn't. It's just not possible. Land is too expensive, construction is expensive. That's where government has to step in. And so we are opening up right now affordable housing for vulnerable people, for low-income families, for even middle-income families. And then we allow the developers to cut their rules, make it easier for them to build housing for those that can afford more expensive homes. So both have to work together.
Okay. Can you elaborate on this part? Because I know housing is your passion, is your ministry, and you're doing so much work on housing. Let's start from people who are the most vulnerable, especially now we just happen to be filming this during the 16 days of gender-based actions against gender-based violence. There's a lot of awareness about vulnerable people and people who need housing in emergency situations, or women fleeing violence and children fleeing violence as well. What are some of the actions you're going to take to support other than the ones that you've mentioned? And maybe you can give some examples of programs or stories you've heard. And how can government step in to help?
Well, in this next year, in the first year, our goal is to be launching 1,200 transition homes.
Oh, wow.
In BC. And so right now we're going through a process where organizations that support women who are fleeing violence, or people fleeing violence, are applying to be the providers. Once we've identified who the providers will be, we will work with them to find land, because it's different building this type of housing. We normally don't publicize it. We don't say this is where the building will be. We don't cut ribbons.
That's right.
We want it to be quiet. We want it to be a safe place. And so what we're doing right now is we're finalizing the list of who's going to be the providers. Then we're going to go out and start acquiring land with them to start building this housing. And our goal in the next 2 years is to have 1,200 units that are opened up in British Columbia.
Not just funded.
Not just funded. And so that's a lot. 1,200 is a lot, because we just did 1,500 in the last 5 years. And so we're looking to double the amount we did in the next 2 years. So it's ambitious, but we need it, because when I first ran for politics, the first issue I fought for was a transition house in my community.
Oh, wow.
So there was Delta did not have a single home, a transition home for women fleeing domestic violence. And so the city had one proposal come forward, the first one, and they said no, because the province said no, there's no money. And so what I did was I started campaigning on the issue, and I started going to people's houses and talking about why it was needed. And next thing you know, the government funded it. And so the first one happened in Delta. And so, because I know how important it is. When you have that place, a lot of people stay in a relationship because they don't have housing, they don't have these things. And so having that available, I think will go a long way. And I appreciate you highlighting the 16 days of activism, because not enough people talk about this. And you've been talking about this a lot. And what that does is it creates more safe opportunities for other people in the province.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, as a survivor myself, I've personally understand the importance of supporting women who are experiencing very tough situations. And thankfully for friends like you, I was able to go through my journey, but I do hope that the government will take more actions to support people with diverse lived experiences and diverse situations. So thank you for sharing that great story about the housing in your community. So let's move from that to talk about other housing opportunities. Like my former riding, I was the MOA for Burnaby-Lohe, and we actually had the largest amount of co-op housing stock in that riding. In the Forest Grove area, there's so many co-op housing units that family have lived there for many years, and even grandparents, and now their kids moving into the co-op complex. There's so many great stories that's shared in that community. What are you doing to find ways to make sure more people can afford homes in our community? Yeah,
in the election we committed to launching a co-op strategy. And so we will be launching one next year. And likely we're going to start with the co-ops we already have. We have a lot of co-ops that have land where we can build more on. We need a federal government partner in this. It's not easy. You can't just do it from the province. It requires federal government. So we're actually going to Ottawa next week to meet with the federal government to talk about co-ops, to talk about more funding, to talk about other changes they can make to support us. Recently, we launched what's called the Rental Protection Fund. And what this fund does is, if you're a renter, and you have many viewers today that are renting right now, it's really scary to see a for sale sign go on the building outside, especially if it's affordable. Because you know a new person might buy that building and they may start evicting people, what's going to happen in the future. We launched a fund that buys those buildings. The government goes and buys those buildings. One of the buildings we bought was 150 co-ops. It was actually, land was privately held, which is not usually the case. We bought that. Now we're already working on plans to expand co-op housing on that site. So co-ops are really important. I think people don't understand what co-ops are enough, but it's going to be a major part of our housing strategy as we go forward.
Well, thank you for explaining the part about co-op housing and then also creative ways to build more homes for British Columbians. How about middle-class housing? Because I think this is a campaign and then this is something that the government has been talking about. How do you partner with local government, developers, and the local community to build more opportunities?
Well, you know, often I hear from people who say, it's great you're building housing for people who are poor or need mental health supports, and then people say, well, what about us? We're working middle-income families, we're making okay money, but we're struggling. And so, and they're correct, historically the province has only focused on more lower-income families. Now we are actually moving into middle-income families. We are using government land. So for example, Delta will identify some land, they own it, they'll give it to us on a lease, and we will build more affordable housing on it for middle-income families. So we are doing things that haven't been done here in British Columbia, in fact, haven't been done in Canada or North America, where we go to churches or faith-based organizations and say, do you have land? Well, often you'll see a church in a parking lot and then you'll see lots of land. We're saying, let us build the housing on that land. We'll pay you a lease. And that allows us to build housing much cheaper than anybody else can. We also have a major project for home ownership. It's coming in the new year. First Nations communities, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations in Vancouver. They said, we've got all this land that's ours. Partner with us. Let's build housing and we will sell the units with a lease. And so we're going to see homes in Vancouver, close to 1,500 of them, sold at 40% below what the market value is for the housing. And the condition is that they have to live in it. If people sell it, we get our money back, the money that we put in, and they have to pay the full amount. And so it creates an encouragement for people to buy a home for their own family. Investors won't be allowed to buy it. It's only for families. So we are looking at different ways to get people into rental, into home ownership. And by the way, it's happened across the world. Singapore has a similar model. In Delhi, they have a similar model. Korea, they have similar models. I believe Hong Kong has a similar model as well. So we're learning slowly, but we're learning from other jurisdictions around the world to build different types of housing here.
Of course. And you mentioned about government's 3 top priorities, and housing, definitely. I remember when we were doing the poverty reduction plan in 2018. Everywhere we went across the province, housing was the key item. So really great to hear about a lot of work you're doing, from supporting the vulnerable people without homes to co-op and creative ways of finding housing, and then to really support the general population to be able to do more housing. But I have to ask this, since you're on my show. So you mentioned about 3 top priorities: healthcare, public safety, and housing. How about childcare? I know you know the question is coming.
I already know the question's coming.
And we had a lot of great ideas to connect childcare to housing. And is childcare still a top priority for the government?
Well, childcare is, I think the top 3 are because they're the biggest pressing issues that we've been hearing from people in our communities. But it doesn't mean everything else is not important. Of course, environment is important. Of course, childcare is important. All these things are going to continue to be done. In fact, I think it's really exciting. We have a new ministry that is just committed to building infrastructure. So Minister Ma is now the minister, and so all schools, all hospitals, correction facilities, anything the government is building will go to one ministry. And so that creates really exciting opportunities for us for childcare. Because now when you have one ministry doing all the infrastructure, that ministry now can also say, okay, we want childcare. Where's the childcare going to be? We're going to build childcare into all the facilities. Before, it was really challenging because you'd have to go and beg them. You know, why don't you put childcare and why don't you put childcare? Now it's all being centrally done, and so that creates opportunities to expand it quite in a big way. You know, my child now is 14, so he's not a child anymore, he's a young adult. And you'll remember him when he was a child. And so I still remember when he was going to elementary school, and we had a big party. We invited all our family and friends, and they said, what's the party for? Whose birthday is it? And I said, it's nobody's birthday. My son Navin, he's going to elementary school, and we don't have to pay for childcare anymore.
Oh, that's such a great celebration.
And it's a big celebration because we were paying so much every single month.
Totally.
And it was such a stress relief for us. And now, partly because of the work you did, people are paying less right now for childcare than when I had my child in childcare many years ago. And how many things can you think of in society that are cheaper now than they were before? And childcare is one of them, and it's because of the work you did. And we have to do more. We have to expand childcare. We have to make sure people are trained up to be able to work in that space. I know that there's a lot of work happening with early childhood educators. My niece is now becoming an early childhood educator, and so that's good. And we need more young people to do that. So childcare is definitely a big part of it because affordability is #1 issue on people's mind. When it comes to affordability, they think housing, but of course it's childcare, it's food. Making sure food is produced locally so people get healthy, nutritious diets. All these things are obviously critically important as we move forward.
Well, thank you for spending some time to share about the Ministry of Infrastructure. I didn't realize that it actually coordinates a lot of capital investments together. And I used to say that whenever you invest in local schools or childcare or facilities that's publicly owned, it becomes a long-term community asset. That's not just benefiting one family who are using that now, it's benefiting countless people and families and children for the generations to come. So thank you so much for sharing on that. So tell me about this new cabinet. Now you've mentioned about housing and infrastructure and other programs. What are you the most excited about for this cabinet that's new or that has changed? I do have also heard that there is some concerns about not having the mental health ministry as well. So can you elaborate a little bit about the changes that has happened for this new cabinet?
Well, we've got a lot of new faces. And the Premier promised a new and very dynamic team, and that's what we have now. You know, Nikki Sharma is now Deputy Premier. We've got Josie Osborne, who's the Minister of Health, Brenda Bailey, who's the Minister of Finance. And so you've got women now playing key roles within Premier Eby's government. And so, you know, I think it'll take a little bit of time for our new ministers to learn and grow in the job. But that being said, when you have somebody coming in new, they have fresh eyes, they look at the problem, and they don't just go into the same solutions, they look at it differently. And so I'm hoping that many of them will be able to do that with the files that they've got. I'm still learning and meeting the new people because there's so many new people. You know, when you and I were there, we knew the same people. We've been there for a long time. Now there's a lot of new faces. So part of it is going to be building relationships and building trust with my new colleagues. But I'm excited to see what they as they do as we go forward.
Well, and we have a government that only has 2 more seats than the opposition. Is that correct too? The gap is 3. Okay. How do you feel about that? Because it's going to be quite a big group of opposition members.
Well, we've been there before, so it's not new. When we were in the minority government, we had 46 seats, you know, 1 less than what we have now. And now we've got a majority. So we've got enough now to do the legislation we need, but we're also going to cooperate. We're going to work with the Green Party. They've said that they've got some things they want to do. We'll work with them to find solutions. Even if there's a couple of Conservative Party members who want to do some good work, honest work for the community, the door is open to have a conversation with them. And so it's going to require us to cooperate, but we've done that before, and I think it'll lead to good decisions for the public. And in the end, that's all that matters, is making sure the public gets good services, they get good results from government, and that's what our goal will be as we go forward.
You reminded me of John Horgan's first campaign slogan, putting people first.
Putting people first.
And during my years in politics, sometimes when we were having very difficult discussions or decisions, I always remember that our team has always been talking about putting people first.
Yeah.
So what would you tell our audience? What's the biggest difference between the NDP government and the Conservative opposition?
Well, there's a lot of differences. I would say that we're focused on where working people are at. Right now, we know a lot of working people are struggling. Cost of food went up with inflation, interest rate went up, rents are a real pressure for people. Getting good access to healthcare has been a real challenge. That's where our focus is. We know that the big companies, the big powerful companies, the really wealthy people are funding the Conservatives, and they've made it clear they're going to fight for those people. But our focus will be to fight for people who, go to work every day, do honest work, and they just want to get ahead. And so we don't want to make sure people don't get just by. We want them to get ahead, have good education for their kids, make sure their kids have good opportunities to make money, to raise families. And that's our focus. And we'll see what the BC Conservatives bring. But so far, I haven't been too impressed, but we'll see as the legislature comes back in the new year.
Well, this is definitely going to be an exciting 4 years, but congratulations on becoming government again. And last question, I'm going to move really fast forward because I know you're going to be in politics for many, many years to come. When I decided to leave politics, I had a lot of reflections to do of I kind of worked in politics for 18 years and being elected for 10 years, so there's a lot of thoughts and reflections. But I feel like I've tried my best when I left. What would you want to tell yourself when you retire one day from politics?
Well, I would say that that's what John Horgan's mom used to say to him. Just do your best. That's all you can do, son. That was his kind of last message to all of us, I think. Do your best. And so that's the same for me. I would love for my community, my riding of North Delta, to say that he did a lot of good things for the community. That's it. Very simple. Because, people come into politics, they leave, they go away and do things in life. But I think what you and I have learned in politics is that we're human beings. And as much as we go there and we have debates and people see us on TV, not agreeing on things, as human beings, we do agree on a lot of things. And so, you never know in politics how long you're going to be in it for.
That's right.
And so I don't take it for granted. But that being said, as long as I've made a difference in my community, I've done some good, honest work. That's all my goal is for the job. So I hope I'm able to do that when my time comes up here.
Of course, and I know your son looks up to you quite a bit as well, and he's really proud of you. So thank you so much, Ravi.
Now he's not looking up anymore. Now he's taller than me, almost, so he's going to be looking down soon.
Yeah, I know. Kids are growing so fast. Your son was young, and mine was young too when we both got elected. But thank you so much, Ravi. It's so nice to have you as my first guest, and welcome to our show. I hope we'll be able to welcome you back in the future as well.
Yeah, congratulations on your new show, and look forward to be back.
Thank you so much. 谢谢各位观众今天的观赏，希望我们下次周一详谈再见。